Hi everyone, this is Evita and Sean Duffy here at From Z to X, a podcast from the Federalist where we talk about pop culture and politics.
Yes, we do. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, everybody. We're still in the Christmas season, so hope everything's been great for all of you as you've spent hopefully time with your family over the last couple of weeks. So what are we talking about today, Vita?
So we're gonna talk about some COVID updates. But first, we're gonna talk about my dad and I's favorite TV series, Cobra Kai, which is the continuation of the Karate Kid story from the 1980s.
Yeah. So listen, love the 80s, and the kids. If you look at the movies today versus the 80s, a lot more wholesome. So a lot of the kids, as they were growing up, were forced to watch the Karate Kid. It's forced,
but we loved it. So
they loved it. And so when Cobra Kai came out, we had them watch that as well. And we're going to talk about the third season just came out a couple days ago on Netflix. But before this, we've watched the previous two seasons as well. So I want to give your insights on that.
Yeah, so first of all, you haven't finished the third season, which has now been bought by Netflix. It was originally created on YouTube Red, but we loved the first two seasons. And let's talk about first why those first two seasons were so good.
So, I guess from my vantage point, you have Daniel-san, and Johnny. If you remember back in Karate Kid, Johnny was the blonde-haired kid who Daniel fought in the tournament championship. And when Daniel did the crane, remember, and kicked Johnny in the head and won the tournament, right? Those two characters have now come back in the Cobra Kai series. And what I thought was fascinating is Daniel has become a successful businessman. He owns car dealerships around California. And if you remember back in Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi had him wax on and wax off, right? And for all the work that he did in the training for karate, waxing his cars and painting his deck, he actually gave him a 1957 like Chevy car. And so it's a throwback to Daniel loves cars, and now he owns car dealerships. And for Johnny, because he lost the tournament in 84, he's been stuck in the 80s, and he's beer drinking, goes from odd job to odd job.
Fired from his job in the very beginning.
From his job, right? But he's
estranged from his son, divorced.
Yep, has muscle cars, listens to White Snake, totally 80'd out, never was able to move on out of the 80s from high school, right? And I think the first two seasons do a very good job of kind of developing these two characters, and you see a lot of redeeming qualities for both of them, but you also see the some of their shortcomings as two characters who are now adults, who we saw as youth, and are now bringing karate to a new generation of young people. And what I think as a father, and I'm going to kick it to you in a second, what I think as a father is they're teaching the lessons that they learned as a young person, and how that lesson has then developed into what they're teaching these new generations of kids. And some of the lessons are really great, and some of them you're like, is that what they learned from, this experience? But that's what we do as parents. We take our life experience, the good and the bad, and try to share those lessons with our kids and with young people. So I love the first two seasons of Cobra Kai, and I've only watched the first three of the third season. So why did you like Cobra Kai, and what's your problem with the third season that came out on Netflix?
So I think similar to you, I loved it for all those reasons, but I think something really important is that we see a lot of remakes these days. A lot of times people are trying to rehash old stuff that people loved and just kind of play off the nostalgia. This series was so good because I felt like it wasn't just a rehash. It was something new that used the nostalgia as it helped it, but it also wasn't the only thing that was there. The new characters were interesting. They had their own love triangles and their own growing pains. And the old characters, like you said, they brought in a lot of depth and new background stories and meanings to all of them. So it was really kind of a refreshing remake of a series that or of a movie that we usually don't see these days because it tends to be kind of poorly done. What got me, there was several reasons why the third season I think was not as good as the first and second one, and it's now on Netflix. And it's not Netflix's fault because as far as my research has told me, YouTube Red had made this third season before Netflix bought it. So hopefully Netflix in the fourth season will make things better. Who knows? But I think that one of the problems that I noticed in it was that one, things had gotten like very silly. The karate kicks and punches to the face were kind of ridiculous. It had already kind of been walking the line in the second season and kind of just got way overdone in the third, and things just got too unbelievable. Something that was really great about the first two seasons was that they really kind of played off this kind of like funny, like poking fun at woke politics is kind of what Johnny did. Like he was kind of like, I'm going to teach you how to be a man to Miguel Diaz, who was kind of like the main character of the first two seasons. And he kind of, just told him to stop playing on your phone, like get out there, start doing karate, stand up for yourself, and still kind of, made some maybe, not so PC comments, but it was kind of endearing. And now in the third season, we're kind of seeing a switch where the bad guy who's making these similar comments to what Johnny did in the first two seasons is actually John Kreese, the original bad guy of the 1984 movie. And so it's kind of like, I wonder if maybe, they got some pushback from that kind of having a good guy make these comments in the first seasons, and now they're going to make the bad guy be that un-PC guy. I don't know, but it was kind of an odd shift, and something that I thought was really kind of funny about the first two seasons that now is kind of disappointing about the third.
So remember in Karate Kid, John Kreese owned the Cobra Kai dojo. He was one that said, "No mercy, show no mercy," right, to all the young kids that were doing the karate and learning from him. And one of the students was Johnny, who, if you recall, in the last fight of that first movie, Karate Kid, that's when Daniel-san did the crane and kicked Johnny in the face and won the fight, right? And so I think you bring up a really interesting point, because in the first two seasons of Cobra Kai, Johnny wasn't an evil character. He wasn't a bad character. He was obviously stuck in the 80s. And he
kind of misguided. He had some problems.
Yeah, he had some problems. But he also had this idea that, listen, man up. Don't be a basement boy. Don't be a pajama boy. If you get hit, you got to get back up and keep fighting. You can't sit there and cry, which is kind of what he learned. But it's a lesson for manhood. It's a lesson for life. And he used some language that maybe makes this a little PG-13. If you have younger kids, they probably shouldn't watch it. But it's very realistic language about, manning up and being tough. And you have to be tough in karate. And I think, to your point, it's when John Kreese, who is the original Cobra Kai, dojo master,
bad guy.
Now he's the bad guy, and he's the one that's delivering this message of, don't be a basement boy.
Don't be a snowflake.
Don't be a snowflake.
None of that in my dojo or whatever.
And what's interesting is you see this cultural wokeness now in America that must be a bad message. Because when Johnny delivered the message of don't be a snowflake, he was redeeming. And you could go, yeah, don't be a snowflake. But now that message is delivered from the evil character, right? The evil guy believes that you shouldn't be a snowflake. But the redeeming characters in the movie, they're the ones that are like, it's okay. Feel, cry. Don't have to stand back up when you're punched, right? Yeah. That's I think concerning, because it is the wrong message. Yeah. If life is not always easy, life throws us curveballs. We do get, metaphorically punched in the head, like you do in karate, and you got to stand up.
Yeah.
You got to be able to, be a man and pull yourself up and keep going, which is what Karate Kid was about and what the first two seasons were about. That's not a bad message. Yeah. Is it?
No, it's not. And I think that, another kind of tangential point to this is that in the first two seasons we had, boys and girls were joining the dojo, Johnny's dojo, and it was, girls would fight girls and it would make sense, and they but in the third season it kind of seems like when you talk about getting out of hand, girls are now able to beat the crap out of a guy who definitely outweighs her by 30 pounds. And that's kind of like unbelievable. And I think kind of playing into this maybe wokeness in the third season that we didn't see in the first two, which is it's just kind of disappointing. It makes it not as enjoyable to watch, because that was so funny and interesting about the first two, that they weren't kind of playing into this kind of wokeness that you see usually in kids programming.
Well, I think you're right. So if you look at the woke culture and what studios have to now promote to be accepted, is that boys aren't stronger than girls. girls are as strong or stronger than boys, and so the superhero, the strongest one, is the girl who's kicking the snot out of all the boys.
And girls can fight. Like, I'm not saying that they shouldn't, and like it's just that, like, it's not really believable if I'm gonna fight with a guy who outweighs me by 35 pounds. I'm not gonna win. But can I fight another girl, and can I fight maybe a guy who's at a similar, level as I am, and maybe I'd win? Sure, but it's just, I don't know.
But that's not politically correct. You can't say that, right? Because you're speaking realistically, and we can't use reality in movies anymore because that's not woke.
Yeah.
And we have to push a different narrative, which I think, again, goes against the reality of, and again, this is obviously TV. We know it's a show, but I'm sick of getting pushed the woke culture on me all over. Or
told if
media.
you're not PC, you're a really bad guy. Like, it's just kind of silly. So, and I think, and as I'm thinking about this, I know that YouTube Red recorded or created the third season before it was bought by Netflix. They had made that third season, and I wonder if maybe they changed their tone for that third season that Netflix bought because they were anticipating getting bought by Netflix. That could have been why we're seeing that shift. And Netflix like, okay, now we'll buy it because you kind of made a little bit of a shift here in that third season.
Well, I would push back on that for 1 second, because who owns YouTube Red? YouTube. Who owns YouTube? Google. A bunch of little woke pajama people out in Silicon Valley who believe to the depth of their core all of these woke principles. So you have this whole leftist ideology that's making the movies that many of us consume. So I would have to imagine that YouTube and Netflix are of the same woke mindset, which, by the way, most common sense Americans don't agree with. But that's probably a different podcast. Our point to you is, if you like Karate Kid, watch Cobra Kai. It's kind of fun. It's kind of unique. You're bringing those characters back from the 80s, and it's really kind of awesome. I've only watched three episodes of the third season, so I'm going to finish it off. Evita's watched the whole thing, and again, was disappointed, right? But all in all, would you watch it again? Would you recommend people watch the third season?
Yeah, I would, and I think that, because I mean the first two were just so great, and I think also, even though I was disappointed by the third season, I would definitely give it another chance in a fourth season. Maybe not a fifth if it's still disappointing, but I do think that the first two are definitely great. You should definitely watch them, and if you want to watch third, you should do that too.
So they bring back in the third season, Elizabeth Shue comes back, right?
She does, yes.
Which
she's the blonde American sweetheart from the original '84 movie.
Right, who Johnny started, or I'm sorry, that Daniel started to date. Also, they bring back I can't remember the kid's name, who said, sweep the leg, Johnny. If you remember when Daniel had his leg hurt and he had to do the crane, the kid that swept his leg, I forget his name. I'm sorry, I can't remember it. But they developed him. Now he's a pastor. He's a preacher, right? And it's just another good storyline to go, we are one thing when we're young, and people grow up and they develop and they become something else. So here you have this kind of nasty character from the '84 movie who's now a preacher and a really godly figure. So
and so
cool.
They did a great job with him, and I think that was an interesting character that they brought more depth to. But on the point about Elizabeth Shue, which is why was another point which kind of had me a little bit disappointed with season 3, is that they brought her in for no reason. Pretty much they kind of just like, they had her there, and she just kind of talked about the old days, and then they Johnny and Daniel met up with her and caught her up on what's happened in season 1 and 2, and that was it. She really served no purpose. She didn't propel the plot. She didn't bring any depth to the other characters. It was just kind of there for nostalgia, and I just kind of felt like that was a little bit insulting to the viewer, because we had been so happy with the first seasons because they hadn't done that to us, and they did kind of lean on that a little too much in this season with this really kind of crappy, clumsy implant of Elizabeth Shue.
Okay, so I didn't think we were going to talk about this for 15 minutes, but let's move to our next topic right now, because we love Cobra Kai.
Yes, sorry.
We love Karate Kid. So let's go to our next topic, Evita, which is going to be a tweet that came out by a doctor, and you're going to give it to us in a second, but how many deaths have taken place around the world in different countries versus the United States? So what do you got?
So if an American had moved, this is a tweet, if an American had moved to Denmark, Norway, or Finland in January, her or his risk of dying from COVID would have been 5 to 10 times lower in 2020. South Korea, Libya, or Hong Kong, 50 to 60 times lower. New Zealand, 200 times lower. Taiwan, 3,400 times lower.
So I think that's an interesting perspective, and I haven't independently researched that data or that tweet, but what I will say is how we calculate deaths from COVID might be different in America versus the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
So if someone has COVID and dies in a motorcycle crash, which this was an example, they will count that as a COVID death.
Yeah.
Not from COVID, right? If you actually have complications from COVID and you pass away, that should be counted. I'm not sure how they're counting COVID deaths in these other countries, or if the other countries are being honest about the numbers that actually are realistic with regard to how many people have passed away.
Right,
from
and we know
the
that
virus.
some countries that are like Russia and China have actually lied about their numbers. I'm not sure about the ones that were named here, but there does seem to be a trend that's saying that other countries are doing way better than the United States, and the question is, why is that happening? Even if we might not be the specific, crazy out like numbers, but it's something's there.
Why?
So I mean we were talking about this before the podcast, and one reason it could be is because of health. I mean, people in the United States, heart disease is the number one killer. They're people aren't eating as well. They don't exercise as much as in other countries where that's more part of their culture, and so people are just naturally more at risk here. That's one problem.
So we're fatter, right? And we're less healthy. We work out less. And again, we have more disease, which gives us more comorbidities. And we know that COVID is dangerous if you're older and if you have comorbidities. And so if you have a less healthy population, you're going to have more death in that population, which is, I think, an interesting point of view, because we know that. We knew this is what the science was telling us. A lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, because of COVID and the restrictions on travel and some of the restrictions on work, a lot of people were at home more often, and oftentimes we're so busy. You have two parents working and you have kids, and you don't have time to cook a meal, and so there's a lot of processed foods that people eat that are less healthy. This could have been a time that our government could have encouraged people to actually cook, to actually eat healthier, and had they done that, we could have seen a transition in, not just a transition in the way that America's working, which is by Zoom or Skype, or other platforms that allow us to do things over the internet. It could have also changed the way we interact with our families at the dinner table, but the foods that we eat, which would have made our families healthier as a unit, but also our bodies healthier because we're eating better. And our government didn't do that. Thank you, Fauci.
Yeah, well, so I like that, you could say, let's have some guidelines. Let's talk about what you can do to make yourself a healthier person and resist getting this virus or dying from this virus. But I think that some of these other countries, they might have more rules about what you can and can't do to try and, force people to be healthier. We saw in New York City that they try to put bans on buying a big gulp, right? And that's not something that we agree with. So what is the balance between, promoting health but not necessarily mandating it on people's lives?
But I think this is the role of government. So the government's role was not to lock me down. The role is not to mandate that I wear a mask or mandate that I can't buy a big gulp or that I should eat a salad. The role of the government should be, hey, I'm going to give you the best information possible. That maybe if you're 83 years old and have diabetes, you should stay home.
Yeah.
You shouldn't travel. You should not have contact with people who have been out and about. That shouldn't be mandated on me, but I should get that guidance. Or if I have some heart problems, I should also protect myself. Give me guidance. Give me guidance with regard to eat less processed foods. Eat more, healthy foods that are vegetables and fruits. That's what I want. I don't want them to mandate it on me, but I'm fine with the government giving me the best data and the best science so I can make decisions for myself. But it seemed like the government was doing mandates of masks and lockdowns and not saying, hey, I'm going to give you some other information about how you can keep yourself healthier. Like when I had COVID, and I was better at this than everyone else was. I was taking D3 twice a day religiously. I was taking zinc and C. And then finally I took hydrochloroquine. And I had a very, small reaction to COVID. You didn't really have any reaction to COVID. She's younger and healthier. But why aren't they telling us those things? Why aren't they promoting those things of healthier bodies mean the greater ability to fight COVID, and they didn't. So
and actually deterring. I mean, they couldn't even buy hydroxychloroquine anywhere you wanted to because they put this political stigma around it.
where doctors weren't able to prescribe it, right? And if you remember, if the press conference that was held on the steps of the Supreme Court, where these doctors came out in their lab coats and were saying hydrochloroquine, when taken early, has a huge impact on people's ability to fight the coronavirus. This is the science. We're on the front lines. We're treating, and we see that this works. Many of those doctors who said that, did that press conference, lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Lost their jobs. And so you couldn't be outspoken because the minority woke culture would shut you down and mandate that you're fired. And so, again, it wasn't about information. It was about controlling, what we put on our faces, where we travel, and less about information to let Americans make decisions for themselves and their families. Yeah. So.
Well, that's a good place to end on. We'll see you guys next week. Hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas, because it's still Christmas until the 6th.
Until the 6th, that's right. So yeah, you guys, thanks for tuning in, and look forward to chatting again next week. Have a good one.